All right. I'm with Adrian Smith, CEO of First Atlantic Nickel. The symbol is FAN on the TSX venture. First Atlantic has had some news recently, some drill results. So I want to get into those results with Adrian. We've had holes 2404 and 2405 out. 2404 was in June. 2405 was literally just this week. So tell us, Adrian, what did you learn from the results of these last two holes from phase one?
Yeah, great to be here. Thanks for having me. Some exciting results. As you said, we had just announced holes 4 and 5, the last holes of our phase one program. And hole 4 specifically was a real better than expected kind of result coming out of that. That's an area where we believe there's a very wide zone of mineralization, and kind of leading into what we could talk about later is that that's going to be part of the follow-up drilling in phase 2 is expanding on that, because those results were very very encouraging. I mean, beyond encouraging. That's exactly the kind of mineralization that we're looking for. Hole 5 is the step out to the north, so that's proving this thing is more than just a kind of restricted occurrence. This is something that occurs over a very large area, and that's hole 5 is above average results. I mean, those results are what we would consider ore grade. I know we can't talk about ore as in mining terms, but that's the type of grade that would be a nice zone in the resource. So that opens up the whole northern extent of the RPM trend. You're looking at well over a kilometer that we have targeted north of that we're going to be exploring and testing as part of our phase 2 program. And that just is really the confirmation that this thing is large scale. So yeah, both holes successful, and both holes showing that the potential on this project is significant.
Okay, so for those who aren't so well versed in Awaruite, let's break down hole 2404 in terms of the assay. So 366 meters, averaging 1.4%. Nickel, you got chromium as well at 1.56%. Mass pull of 9.53% and a DTR grade of 0.14%. So explain that to us and what's really important to take away from those numbers.
Yeah, it's the Awaruite. Awaruite makes the mining of this type of nickel economic or efficient due to the unique mineral properties of the mineral being highly magnetic. Enables us to use a magnetic separator to reduce or to pull out the magnetic content of the rock. So that's what we call the mass pull, is the amount of material that is pulled out from the magnets. So when we say there's 8 to 11% mass pull, that's your resulting material that is pulled out of your feed that allows you to reduce the entire volume of material that you're then working with. So right out of the gate, you get, if you have a 10% mass pull, just as a nice round number, you're only dealing, going forward in your processing with 10% of the total volume. So that enables us to work with very large tonnages, well over 100,000 tons per day to 150,000 tons per day is kind of the conceptual volumes that we're talking about here. So when you're dealing with that kind of volume, being able to reduce that by 90% reduces your costs of processing as you go down the line. So when we do the DTR testing, that's essentially giving us an idea of what is going to happen at a larger scale. It's a small scale magnetic separation test. It pulls the magnetic material out of the rock. And then in the assay lab, what they do is once they've pulled that material out of the rock, they use an XRF fusion method to assay the content of nickel in that rock. And that's what our initial concentrate is. That's our magnetic concentrate that is going to end up sitting at the surface that we can then further process and refine in a smaller capacity to upgrade that material to a 60%. So initially, what we're trying to get through to investors is that for a very low cost, you're bulk mining this, putting it through a chemical-free process that's magnetic separation. It's done around the world on a large scale to reduce the content by 90% and upgrade the nickel to 1.4, 1.5%. That's then your material that you can use flotation on, or what's the main means is to float it, to separate and further upgrade it to a 60% without needing smelting at any part of that process, and actually have a saleable concentrate that avoids this kind of disastrous critical mineral supply chain and issues with the geopolitics that's happening around the world right now. And this enables a pure domestic supply of this material, this metal, to be produced right on site. So that's really significant. When we get those results back, we calculate the DTR, which is what one of those numbers is. But when the assay lab gives us the assay certificate, they tell us this is the amount of material that's been pulled out, which is the number we're reporting as the mass pull, and this is the grade of it. From that, we then calculate, on our own what we call the DTR nickel is, and that's the number is the 0.14 nickel that we're giving there, and that's a representation of the total nickel in the whole rock that we're recovering. So not a grade of the initial rock, but a recovery of the material at the end of the process.
Got it. Yeah, it's pretty technical, and the company has put together some good videos and content to help explain the process. I now fully understand it. It took a little bit to fully comprehend, but basically the grade of the nickel in the drill core is somewhere around 0.25, and then you get the DTR number, which is somewhere between usually 0.1 and 0.15. You've had the DTR come back as high as 0.18 in some areas of the drill core, but the average grade in hole 2404 was 0.14%. And that's a good DTR grade.
It's a great recovery. Absolutely. That's very encouraging to see that. And, if we can get that in broad zones, that's going to, put together a nice starter operation or starter pit when you go into production. So that's, very, very encouraging to see that right at surface. I mean, that's the other thing, right, is you want these zones. We have a nice zone of 0.14 in hole 5 as well. It's not right at surface, but this is, I always say, like, what's the chances when you're just starting on a project that you're going to get the best hole out of the gate? And, we kind of thought, oh, maybe we hit it out of the park on hole 2, because it was so, for us, so exciting that we hit, really kind of encouraging good DTR numbers and recovery numbers. But then, this is kind of the point. You keep drilling, and our drilling is essentially just not targeting any, like this specific outcrop or this specific spot, I think we can high grade out of here. This is just like, we have a huge broad area, and we're doing consistent step out holes on a grid pattern. And, when you keep doing that, you're going to end up defining areas that maybe you didn't expect were going to be quite so good as being, some of the best areas. And, so by taking those steps, we're, inevitably going to continue filling in this area with additional drilling to build towards a resource. And I believe that there's going to be areas, especially after looking at hole 4, where you're going to get stuff that's, economically significant sitting at surface in kind of large pods or large volumes that will really help out the economics of the project.
Okay. And when we're talking about the mass pull, this is the portion of the drill core, or basically the ore, you could call it, that is magnetic. So we're talking about the nickel, the chromium, is there anything else there?
Those are the main components. You do get cobalt and some small amounts of copper come along with it. The cobalt, at the end of the day, when you have your higher grade concentrate, will be or should be a payable byproduct. The chromium is coming out in the magnetic concentrate. And when the magnetic concentrate, essentially you're going from, our goal is to put together a 1 billion ton deposit that's, near surface in at least one area on the project. We believe that there's potential for more than one area to have significant tonnages. But if you look at it from that aspect of, having 1 billion tons and you get a 10% mass pull, you have 100 million tons of 1.4 whatever percent nickel at surface. We're looking at a significant asset, right? Like, that's a huge amount of material to have with a high grade of nickel content. And then you take that material and you basically skip out the smelting process and send it straight into a high grade concentrate and can ship it to, a buyer. But from that same material that you then have, you have the ability to have a secondary valuable component to it, which would be the chromium. And that's what we're investigating. So from that material, we're seeing similar amounts of chromium recovery as a DTR chromium, because DTR is just a method of pulling things out with a magnet. So, you can call it DTR chromium or DTR nickel, it can apply to both. So when we're looking at the chromium, we have similar grades, maybe a little bit higher than the nickel, but that's not easily at this point converted. So talking about that volume of material that we have sitting at the surface that has now a high nickel content and a high chromium content, we're then looking at ways that we can get value from the chromium as a byproduct. It comes out in the mass pull, it comes out in the magnetic material. So our primary components of this are magnetite, nickel in a Awaruite form, and chromite and chromium. And then to upgrade that chromium into, say, a ferrochrome product would require us to further upgrade it in a separate processing line and take it to like a 50% or higher. And that's something that, we've seen scientifically can be done. The question is, can you do it economically? And that's something that, would just be that we're investigating as potential.
Okay. So the main takeaways for me from phase 1 is the 4 drill holes at the RPM zone all hit wide zones of good grades, with the DTR grades ranging from 0.11% to 0.15% in those 4 holes. And the last hole reported was a pretty big step out to the north. So that's very encouraging. So then what do you take from those 4 holes at the RPM zone to guide you into phase 2? And what are you doing in phase 2 now?
Yeah, I mean, so it's, I guess the takeaway is that, all the holes that have been drilled so far are showing, the extension of at least 200 meters with each drill hole. And then with hole 5 being a 400-meter step out, the takeaway is that this is a large-scale thing. And the plan for phase 2 is just to continue defining the area from this starting point, but not taking 10-meter step out or 100-meter step out, to take 200 and 400-meter step outs every single time that we put in a new hole, so that we can define a large volume. The goal here is that it has to be big, and the tonnage has to be there, and the consistency needs to be there, and that's what we're showing. And that's that will be really what will determine the success of phase 2 is being able to define a much larger area where we can look towards. I mean, a billion tons is a huge amount of volume. You're talking, 150,000 tons a day for 20 plus years, right? So this is significant volume. We believe that we have that potential here. We're looking for phase 2 to at least start to, to define that footprint, so that we can move towards a resource as quickly as possible. Because, having a strategic partner, they obviously have the intent of seeing this thing developed. And we're doing our best to do that. And in order to get there, we need to show that this footprint is possible. Now, in the midst of all of this, we do think that there's potential for second zones that could be within a proximal area where you could have maybe 2 simultaneous pits ongoing at the same time. That's, a little bit more blue sky right now. We're excited about the work that we're doing this summer that is going to help to show that, because that's, that takes this project to a whole nother level. I mean, right now, even getting to, the billion-ton kind of footprint area is our goal. And, we believe the potential is there to do that. And that's what we're focusing on in phase 2. But then, we'll see that, in conjunction with the field work. We're not just, drilling, we're out there mapping and sampling and doing additional work on the project to help advance it and show that, this thing is special.
Yeah, I mean, the scale potential is obviously there. So the 4 holes from phase 1 at the RPM zone gave good results and a lot of encouragement. In phase 2, are you still focusing at the RPM zone, or is there any stepping out to the north or to the east towards the Chrome Pond zone? There was also a hole in phase 1 where you drilled near a fault where the grades were a little higher, or are you investigating that further in phase 2?
I mean, all of the above, I would say. To call the RPM zone just, the area that it started out as is doesn't really hold true anymore, because, what we're seeing is that it's just expanding beyond the boundaries that we had kind of in our minds initially. So, as a goal for the company to get an economic resource in place that would be significant and have, good economics and initial study, that can be done at the RPM zone, what we're calling the RPM zone. Now, that extends from where the RPM zone was. It encompasses basically all of Chrome Pond. There's a limit to where it's going to go, onto the east side, but that's just because there's, it's going to be sediments bounding it, but it's still at least hundreds of meters wide, and that's part of what phase 2 is going to be designed to do, to test the limits of how wide this whole body is, and it's expanding all the way north to the Pipestone target, right? So the scale is significant, and so as opposed to just focusing on, RPM is just a nice name for this area, this zone where it started, and we just keep calling it the RPM zone. But really, we've already, hole 5 drills pretty close to Chrome Pond. As we continue doing another step out and another step out, all of a sudden we'll be in Chrome Pond. But as a whole, I think we're going to continue calling it the RPM zone, because that's a continuous mineralized body that we're defining. And that's the key point, is that it's not segregated, it's not separated, it's not going to be a pocket here and a pocket there. Like, this is going to be potentially one massive mineralized body that we can encompass in a pit, and we can show that volume is has potential for X amount, and what the economics are, and that's how we create value. That's how we show that this project is is economic and containing good mineralization in one area. So that's 100% our main focus. And again, as we do the field work, we're talking about expanding to the north. That's where it changes from drilling to surface sampling and trenching and stuff like that. But the core of the area, as long as we continue to step out 400 meters at a time and hit, that's what we're going to keep doing, and expand on the width to basically with the goal of building significant tonnage that we can move into a resource category as quickly as possible.
Okay, I think the last time we spoke, the plan for phase 2 was something like 7 to 10 holes, and each hole is about 400 or so meters deep. Is that still the plan? And what can you tell us about the progress? How many holes, do you have down in phase 2 so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's ongoing. The drill's turning. So, every minute or every hour we get another couple meters. But yeah, we've put out in our last results, we've drilled holes 6 and 7 to expand around hole 5 as a step out. Can't comment too much on that without putting a bit, any information out, an equal dissemination to the market. But as far as what we're seeing, we got ultramafics plotted in those holes, and obviously, so far the geologists are working on putting some material together, getting the samples to the labs that we can get the analysis and the test work done, the DTR test work done, and get that back and start to get that out to the market as quickly as possible. And what we've seen from phase 1 to phase 2 is we've really figured out how to streamline that process. There was issues that created a lot of delays going from one lab to another, and just delays internally at the lab that didn't produce a good turnaround time for us, and that kind of wasn't acceptable for phase 1 as far as we were concerned. So we put a lot of effort into ensuring the samples get to the lab and they get processed at that lab in an adequate time to be then reported to the market. So I think you're going to see a big difference from phase 1 to phase 2 in turnaround times for results. And yeah, I mean, there were some comments out there, some questioning, when you don't get results, that means they're bad. Well, clearly, hole 4 took forever, but it was the best hole of the project so far. So it's clearly not the case. Once we got those our results, we were excited about them and got them out as quickly as possible. And yeah, I mean, they've all been very, very encouraging, and in our minds, they're excellent results. So we're hoping that phase 2 and the additional drilling that we're stepping out is going to produce similar results, and that's what we believe is possible here because of the consistency in the style of mineralization with the nickel alloy, the Awaruite. The way that it's developed in the rocks is a very consistent process that occurs over a large area. So we have the right conditions in the RPM zone. The RPM zone expands up to the chrome pond, at least up to the pipestone. So like, we're talking about a very large area here, and everything that we've seen at surface and so far in the drilling indicates to us that we're going to have a very large area to include in a potential resource.
Yeah, I was just thinking to myself, if so the 4 holes at RPM from phase 1, if you're able to replicate those results in phase 2 over, let's say, 6, 7, 8 holes in step outs, that would be, in my mind, that would be very good. That would be a very positive outcome for phase 2. What are your thoughts on that? Like, what's the bar at that you feel that you need to meet or exceed in phase 2?
Well, it's funny, like when we started, the bar was at, getting an area that could potentially be 500,000 or 500 million tons.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're already, past that, especially with the initial drilling in phase 2. And now the bar's gotten higher, right? Now it's like, this is what you need. Now the bar has gone up, and this is what you should want, right? This is what would be really, really positive and really good for the project. And I think that's increased it up to, an area including a billion tons at similar grades to what we've seen. And based on the surface work and, the initial drilling that we've done, that's our goal is to make that happen. And, you get there by having a process, by doing a systematic approach, and especially with this kind of size of deposit. Like, I've been through this before when we had an iron ore project, and we went from 0, a magnetic anomaly, to 7 billion tons in a resource. And we did that just by having a plan and just doing consistent separation, because you're just building tonnages. It's not about, oh, I hit here or I hit there. It's tonnage, right? How do you get tonnage? You have to stay within the good mineralization, but you need that mineralization. You need to understand that mineralization. How do you follow it? How do you capture it into drilling? If you get that, if you understand that, which is, with the help of guys like Ron Britton and Mike Pillar, our on-site geologist, we've got a pretty good understanding of, where and how this mineralization is forming. Now it's just, okay, like, lay a grid pattern over it and drill some deep holes. And so what we're seeing, the second kind of thing that's changing a little bit in phase 2, is we're able to drill deeper now. We have a more powerful rig on site that we can go deeper And so we're really looking to maximize what you could do in an efficient pit. So we're not planning, like this mineralization is these huge bodies. Like it probably goes down well over a kilometer, but drilling to a kilometer is not going to give us any value, because when you do an economic analysis on an open pit operation, you're going to get a bottom of that pit, and they're going to say, well, it's going to cost too much to move those tons below 500 meters. So we're not going to drill below 500 meters just for the purpose of saying we have a long hole. The market loves long holes, right? The market, if we drill an 800-meter hole of whatever, they go, oh my God, 800 meters. But really, if you have 800 meters along surface, that's better, right? If you're doing 3 drill holes that show there's a zone of good mineralization over 800 meters, I mean, you're taking that 800-meter vertical and you're putting it horizontal, and think of how much cheaper that is to extract. So that's really the focus here, is to have this conceptual pit already planned and drill within it so that we can maximize the number of meters towards a resource.
So the metallurgical work is super important for this project. It's paramount. Do you feel like you finally got the lab that knows what they're doing and can do these assays in the right way in a time efficient manner?
Yeah, and we're not necessarily recreating a wheel here. There's other companies out there that have done a lot of the legwork to get to this point, and we appreciate that. So yeah, the lab that we've kind of settled with here that has good turnaround times, good understanding, is a lab that has worked with first or FPX nickel quite a bit. So we're able to leverage that kind of knowledge and experience and be comfortable with their process and the results.
Okay, so there was a large investor who helped the company with a $3 million funding at the beginning of the year. Just interested in what your conversations are with that party, and if they feel encouraged after phase 1 results.
Yeah, so our strategic investor has been very supportive of this project. We have, I believe, is a very good relationship with them, and we're trying our best to maintain that relationship, and so far not talk about it in any way that as far as disclosing who they are and whatnot. But they are very encouraged, and they are a very good partner to have, and very supportive, and obviously in seeing the initial results of phase 1, being from their perspective coming into this, having this potential but not proof was a big risk. And so far the results of phase 1 proves that potential is real, and the amount of risk has decreased significantly now that we actually have results in place. And they're very excited about phase 2, because phase 2 is now, phase 1 is it there? Now we know it's there. Phase 2 is, how big can it be, right? Continuously stepping out and showing, is this repeatable? Can you get it over these large areas? That's the kind of excitement that comes with phase 2, is like, hey, it's there now. How much of it can we have? And that's what they really are excited to find out.
Some shareholders who I speak with on a regular basis, they say, FANCF is putting out good drill results. Like, this is getting bigger, and I can see it growing a lot larger. Why isn't the share price doing better? It should be at 30 cents, or it should be at 35 cents. Like, everybody has their opinion, but we're at support right now, 20 cents. It seems like the stock is comfortable there. What do you say? Like, why isn't the stock trading better?
Yeah, I mean, I wish personally that it was trading better. We are putting effort into market awareness and to try and educate the general kind of investor base on the potential of what we have here. I would say nickel, is not in a good spot right now, so there's not a lot of general market attention for the commodity. But this is kind of one of the opportunities that I see in the industry, being involved in the industry for a long time. It's, if you wait for, especially on the project development side, if you wait for a commodity to get hot, you're going to be chasing it when it's hot, right? It takes time, and it takes sometimes years to position yourself to be in a position to really take advantage of that. When nickel does start to go up, you already have something that you've developed and that you're advanced on, right? You're not getting something new and trying to throw something together. Like what we're trying to do is build a real project here. We're not trying to do a quick hot flash in the pan promote and run this thing up and spend all our money on promotion and then bail out. Like that's not at all what we're doing here. We're building something real. You can see that in the amount of work that we've done in advancing this project, and especially with phase 2, like we're going to be looking at a significant volume of material that we've kind of outlined and done metallurgical test work on. So we're setting ourselves up is what we're doing. As far as the share price goes, like I would like to, it would be better for us if it was higher. It would allow us to get less dilutive capital. But luckily we do have a strategic partner that believes in that and sees that long-term angle. Like they believe in nickel long-term, right? Like they don't care what nickel is today. They're looking at the long-term. And by working with them, we're able to leverage that relationship and get less dilutive capital. But again, I just think the market, the industry is not attracted to nickel right now. So I do also believe that, there's always room in any market for a good story. And hopefully as we start to show that this project has this significant size potential with consistent grades, and people start to actually look at the economics and see how efficient and effective magnetic separation of this nickel is, how clean it is, how environmentally friendly, and all the potential, byproduct benefits out of it. Just the value of that will start to give people a better indication of what the value of this company should be, because it should be a lot higher.
Yeah, that was a good answer. You have to build a foundation and build a real project that has economic value over multiple market cycles and cycles in nickel or whatever it is that the project has, and you gotta build it and then they will come. That's how it works in this business. So you're in the process of making a project that has a resource that has real economic value, and then the cycle will eventually turn. And it's kind of crazy. I'm just thinking, like, copper on the COMEX today is $5.60, and the price of nickel is still below $7. It's like, wow, copper is going to soon be at parity with nickel, which is absurd because I've never seen that in my career.
Yeah. No, it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't reflect. I mean, nickel, as far as I know, doesn't have any future pricing on it, which is hard to, factor into where the market's going. But you also have a lot of loss leaders in the nickel industry that are operating at losses here. Mm-hmm. So, especially on the smelting side, even in Indonesia, they're not making money at these prices. So you're going to see that change, right? That's something that's not going to last, and globally the commodity prices just they have to continue to rise. They're in no matter what commodity space you're in, really, and copper's obviously showing that right now. And the price of some of these commodities is starting to just gradually go up, and they're going to end up in a place where you look back 10 years and you say, oh, that was obvious. Like it's the demand cycle, right? It's just constantly increasing demand across the board.
Yeah, so this is a real value opportunity at a cycle bottom in nickel, and this is smelter-free nickel. So we don't need to build a smelter to process this potential ore body. Final question for you, Adrian. So what kind of news flow can we expect from FAN during the second half of 2025? And obviously investors always want to know, when can we expect the results to start to come out?
Yeah, no, it's a continuous kind of process. Right now we're in the midst of drilling, which means that the news flow should increase. We got our guys all working in the field, trying to get everything processed and sent to the lab. We're putting in a ton of effort to try and increase the turnaround time to make it a lot quicker than we saw with phase 1, so that we can actually start to get the results out to the market sooner. So, we're planning to have a pretty significant amount of news coming out, and we're going to try and, regardless of if it's drill holes, we're going to try and keep the market updated on what's going on in general with the project. And as part of that, you'll see the drill results come out, as they come, and maybe some indications of what the drilling is seeing visually prior to that. But, at this point, it's our focus is to start getting just regular news out so people can be updated and aware of what the activity is that's going on at the project.
All right. Thank you, Adrian. Cheers.
No problem.